Okay. All right. Sorry about the delay, everyone. If you haven't seen these streams before, my name is Derek Wright. I'm one of the owners of Houghton Horns, and I have been helping people to choose their French horns for 10 years now. I can't believe I've been doing it for this long. I've seen lots of different people, lots of different types of people looking for different things. And I have, over the years, figured out that there is a good way to go about choosing a horn, and there is a bad way to go about choosing the horn. Now, before I say anything, I want to make it clear that everything I'm going to say is my opinion. If you have a different opinion, please go ahead and leave it in chat. If you have any questions about anything I'm going to say, please leave it in chat as well. I'd be happy to answer any questions to the best of my ability. But if you disagree, just go ahead and let me know respectfully and we can have a dialogue about it. I also want to say that even though I do own a French horn store, well, a brass instrument store, because we over the years we now do trumpets and trombones. Don't think of this as just an advertisement for some of the horns that we have at Houghton Horns. You can look at this video as a reference to try out any instrument, whether that be French horn, trumpet, trombone, whether you're doing that at our shop or another shop. These same principles apply. The first thing you need to decide when you are picking a French horn is deciding on your budget. And I would decide on a budget and stick to that budget. When it comes to French horns, anyway, you will tend to get what you pay for. So if you look at horns that are more expensive, you are going to get horns that play better. What do I mean by play better? They're easier to play, they produce a better, more consistent tone, and they just overall make your job of making art easier. That being said, horns can be broadly put into three different categories. The first would be factory made instruments, the second would be small workshop made instruments, and the third would be handmade custom instruments. The only real difference is scale, but you do see different things appear in each category. In the factory made category, those tend to be the cheaper instruments. Those are instruments that are made at a larger scale, a lot of times aimed towards schools. And although factory made horns are often played by professional players, for example, look at how many professionals play Kine 8Ds, which is one of the quintessential factory made horns. Because of the because of the scale and the amount of people involved in the manufacture of the instruments, they do tend to be um, more inconsistent. So So you may find that the differences in horns vary quite a bit. But that again, that also depends on the company you're talking about as well. Some companies are not nearly as inconsistent as others. The next category would be small workshop instruments. These are instruments that are made in a small workshop. So I would say any workshop with under 20 people working on the horns. So we're talking brands like Ricocoon, Engelbert Schmid, Finca, Dietmar Dirk. These are all small workshop horns where the head of the head of the factory, usually the person who put his name on the building, uh, tends to be the endpoint for quality control. So these horns tend to play quite well. Uh, Although any horn, whether that be a factory or a custom horn, can be a dud. These horns uh, tend to be more consistent and tend to have a lot of innovation put into them. The small workshops, they're really competitive with each other, so they're always innovating, creating new models, refining their instruments to make them play that much better. And then the last category, so by the way, small workshop horns would tend to be from 7,500 to $11,000. Factory made horns tend to be under 7,500, and the custom horns will tend to be over $10,000. Custom horns, these are makers like Berg, Rauch, Lewis, um, my horn, which is made by Jacob Mellon in North Carolina, um, like an original Carl Geyer horn. These are all truly custom horns. And by custom horns, I mean that they tend to be made by 1 to 2 people. And they take a lot longer to make because that individual is putting all his time and effort into your horn when he's working on your horn. This, of course, leads to incredible instruments, though, again, duds exist at every single price point with almost every maker. That's just a fact. Custom, a lot of people in the French horn world do feel that at some point you need to upgrade to a custom horn and and find that Rauch for $20,000 or that Lewis for 17. And that's not really necessary. You can find great horns in the other two categories that will play at a professional level. So when it comes down to it, you need to pick a horn based on what you like. Now, we're going to get into the meat of this talk. What should you be looking for in a horn? And the number one thing is sound. Now, that might seem like a duh statement. Like, duh, of course you should be listening to sound. Of course, I'm looking at sound. But I will tell you right now, that is not the case for most people looking at a horn. It can be easy to be sucked into how does a horn look? How do the valves feel? How does it feel to play? What what does my teacher play? What does this player I idolize play? And while all of those things shouldn't be completely ignored, they do tend to overshadow the sober assumption, the sober assessment of what the sound of that horn is on you. And different horns will work better for different people. Unless you blow like that famous player and you have the same embouchure and jaw structure as that famous player, and you use the same mouthpiece as that famous player, and you have the exact same sound concept of that famous player, you don't necessarily need to just be copying what they do and what equipment that they use. Now, great, you should have that sound in your head as a target for what horn makes it easier for me to achieve that sound. But don't get into the idea that you need to copy that equipment exactly. Now, what does focusing on sound mean? Number one, tone. Is it a tone that meets your taste? not someone else's taste. Is it a tone that meets your taste? Is that tone objectively good? Objectively bad tones would be tones that are too woofy and too hollow and too empty. On the other side of the spectrum, a bad tone could be something that's too direct, too shrill. Um, Most people tend to go on the side of too empty and too hollow rather than too shrill. At least most of the people I've worked with. But both ends of that spectrum can be objectively bad sounds. Clarity and articulation. Are you able to slur easily and cleanly? Are you able to articulate notes well? Do the notes start immediately? Or do you have a problem hitting them? Or is there a delay? This will especially be apparent if when you're trying out a horn and you get a lot of twa-twas and wah-wahs while you're playing. That horn may not be responding as well as you need it to. Is the instrument in tune? This is especially something that needs to be taken into account for older instruments. Newer instruments, due to modern acoustic technology and the testing tools available now, will all tend to be in tune. There are some exceptions, and of course, I will repeat it over and over again. There are duds, and for every single category of horn. Most newer horns are going to be in tune. My older horns, when you're looking at old C.F. Schmidts, old Geyers, old Crispas, Knopfs, while great horns, they do tend to have more intonation problems and wolf notes and like bad high B flats, etc. So be sure to watch out for that. I mentioned that you shouldn't pick a horn based solely on the feel of the horn. And again, while feel is important, you shouldn't dismiss it. Understand that most times the horn that's going to feel best to you is the horn that is closest to the horn that you are already using and that you are already used to. And that's not necessarily what you're going for with a new horn. If you're shopping for a new horn, I'm assuming you want something better or something that suits you better, not going with something that's just close to what you're using now with a little bit of a change. Now, let's get into the actual technique for trying out horns. I recommend that you always start off on the horn that you're used to. When you make an appointment at Houghton Horns to come try instruments, on our appointment page in our follow up email, we always ask customers to bring the horn they're currently using, whether or not they own it. If you're renting a horn from a school, you should bring that. Renting it from another music store, you should bring that. But you need to have a point of reference in the room that you're trying out horns and on that day, because of course we feel differently from day to day, and some day things might really work and some day things don't. So we don't want to pick a horn based on which horn gives us the best high register on a day when we might just be goosing the high register too much and it's not really responding well on any horn. So be sure to have your horn there as a reference. It's always best, no matter who you are, whether you're a seasoned professional or a beginner, to have someone around to give advice and to give a second opinion on that tone. Other people will be able to hear things that you might miss. If you come to Houghton Horns, you can have one of our salespeople will be there to help you and give a non-biased opinion on the tone of the horn. Or you can have someone else come, a colleague or a friend who's willing to come and listen. I recommend that you compare two horns at a time. Again, starting with your horn. So, for example, if I was trying out horns right now, I would first try out my medlin, then I would try out the next horn. Now, notice that the excerpt I played was very short. We want to keep, especially when you're first weeding out instruments, you want to keep the segments you play very short. And you want to keep the time between horns very short so you can do a direct comparison. You also don't want to tire yourself out on any particular horn before you've had a chance to try out everything available to you. So now I'm going to compare my horn to another horn. Of course, I feel that my horn's going to do better. But this horn is a Paxman 20. So we'll see how it does in comparison to the Paxman 20. I turned up my volume in the middle of that just because I saw a message in chat saying that they needed more volume. If the volume isn't good, just go ahead and chat me up and let me know, and I can turn it up again. But there we go. We have a comparison between the Medlin and the Paxman, and now I should choose between these two based on the sound and which one I liked better. So just for comparison's sake, let's just say I liked the Paxman better. So now I'm going to go on with the Paxman as my new number one, and then I'm going to try it against another horn. Note that I'm going to play the Paxman 20 again. I never want to go off of the distant memory of what I thought a horn was. Each time I compare, I'm going to try each horn again. Now I'm going to try it against a Ricocoon triple horn. This is a W393. Quite expensive as most triple horns are. I plan on talking more about the pros and cons of triple horns and the different ones available on Friday, since I have a rare opportunity when we just have a lot of triple horns available in the shop. So for now, I'm just going to do a comparison on sound. So comparing between those two, let's just say I like the Paxman better. These aren't my actual opinions on what I like, but I just want to show more of the process of comparing the horns. By the way, I'm super interested. If you want to leave a message in the comments to let me know which horn you like the sound of best, please do. I just always love hearing what horns other people like and what sounds that they like when you know when I play. So now I'm going to compare the Paxman 20 to a Con 8D. So Con 8D, this is the first nickel silver crispo horn that I've tried today. So let's talk a little bit about the difference between Geyer and Crispa style horns. You might have heard a little bit there in my comparison of the Paxman 20M and the Con 8D. Crispa style horns will have a bigger, broader sound, and that's due to the size of their bell throats. The size of their bell throat, not the size of their bore. There's a little bit of a pet peeve. Most horns have bores of 11.9 millimeters. Some European horns have bores of 12 millimeters. And some, quote, large bore horns have bores of 12.1 millimeters. The bore, although it does make a difference in the resistance of the horn, is only one tiny piece of the puzzle as to how a horn feels like it feels. And for the most part, can be disregarded. It's at least from it can't be disregarded from the maker's point of view, obviously, but it can be disregarded from the player's point of view. Most manufacturers and even our website, we post the bore sizes of the horns, but it's it's not really something to concern yourself with. Bell throat, however, will make a big difference. Again, Crispa style horns have a larger, broader sound bell due to the bell, which flares out quicker and is larger in the throat here. If you take a look at this Paxman, you see it's much narrower here. That means the sound is going to be more colorful, more direct, more projecting. Most people in the United States anyway. Most professionals in the United States are moving towards Geyer style horns. Now, most everyone has played a nickel silver crispa of some sort because they are still used by most schools and most parts of the country. However, in professional orchestras, that large horn is starting to become a dying breed outside of some groups like the Cleveland Orchestra, the San Francisco Opera, and a few others. It again comes down to your personal preference. The Geyer style horn is not inherently better than the Crispa style horn or vice versa. They're only different. So you have to consider who else will you be playing with, where where are you going to be, and what kind of sound do you want to hear. As far as the metals are concerned, nickel silver is actually the hardest, brightest sounding of the three metals, the other two being yellow brass, which is in the middle, and then gold brass, which is the softer, more mellower sounding metal. Nickel silver is used on a lot of large horns, actually as a temper to its naturally large sound. Because nickel silver is used on a lot of large horns, there's a misconception that nickel silver creates a darker, broader sound, but that's not true. It's again used, it tempers the large, dark sound of a Con 8D. So between the Con 8D and the Paxman, let's say I'm gonna continue with the Paxman. Now let's compare it against another large nickel silver horn. So as I said before, we're going to play the Paxman first, and then I'm going to play the Hans Hoyer 6801. Now, although it may seem repetitive, I am playing the same excerpt on all of the horns for consistency, as you should do when you're trying out a horn. You want to be as consistent between each of the horns as possible so that you basically you give them the fairest chance that you can. So there we go. I've tried all of the horns that I have here. And at this point, if I'm listening critically and listening closely to the sound, I should be able to have a good idea as to which horn I'm going to pick. Since I've eliminated a lot of the other choices in the head on head matches, I'm not sitting considering five or six horns that I'm just going playing one, two, three, four, five, one, two, three, four, five. By the time I get to five, forgetting what one sounded like and confusing myself. I've clearly eliminated horns as I've tried them and come up with a champion. A few other thoughts. You always want to play using the same well, not always. You want to play for the most part using your mouthpiece. For myself, that is my trusty Varus PF, which one day I'm going to do a full video on because I love this mouthpiece so much. Uh, and yes, I did. It is one that I had a large hand in designing, so of course I should love it. But there's a bit of a story behind it that I want to share. The only exception to using the same mouthpiece that you always use is if you are using a mouthpiece that is just inherently bad for you. And when you come to Houghton Horns, we have professional musicians who help you out. Like I can tell someone right away, hey, I think this is one of the rare instances where I think we need to look at mouthpieces before we take a look at horns. What's a bad mouthpiece? If you're using a mouthpiece that is just radically the wrong size for you. For example, I'll see someone come in with larger lips like myself trying to play a Holton MDC, which has an inner diameter in the 16s. If you try to force large lips into a very, very tiny mouthpiece, you're going to get a very strained, very tight and strident sound. And you don't want to try out horns in that state because you're going to be trying to find a horn that's going to help you not sound strident and bright, but you really need to get that mouthpiece set to something more reasonable before you start trying horns because you don't want to basically you might be trying to solve a problem with the wrong tool. So you're trying to find a horn that's going to help you sound better when the first thing you need to do is find a mouthpiece. Now, again, that happens in rare instances. For the vast majority of people, you want to keep the variances down and you want to try a horn. You want to try horns on the mouthpiece you are most comfortable with. Now, I've been peeking over here at my computer and I see there are a few things in the chat here. Okay, so what's my opinion of the Alex 103? The Alexander for me, the Alex, like I can't say anything about the quality of the Alex 103 or anything like that. They're top quality instruments made made really well. Especially the newer ones. Between new Alex 103s and older Alexander 103s, I tend to like the newer ones better. Sound wise, it's just not my cup of tea. I'm not a huge fan of the ergonomics of the 103, which are great for Europe. They're kind of the European ergonomics. So, what I mean by that is on an American horn, it's positioned like this. Alexander 103 tends to be pulled back a bit. Not a big fan of that. And the sound is just not as meaty. It's not as meaty as I prefer. Again, just personal opinion, nothing about the quality of Alexander at all. It's just not an instrument that I would choose. Is that a Holton? Nope. The two nickel silver horns I had were Hoyer 6801 and a Con 8D. I'm a trombonist. What am I doing here? Yeah, what are you doing here? We do sell trombones, and hopefully we'll have our trombone specialists do a talk like this in the near future. He's a great guy, super knowledgeable, really busy freelancer, and an excellent player. So I think you'll really want to hear what he has to say. Now it's hard to find a good 103. There have always been rumors that Alexander 103 keeps the best horns in Europe and then sends the bad ones to America. I tend to not believe that because that would be a great way to um, to hurt your reputation. So I don't tend to believe rumors like that at all because it would make no sense for the company to do that. Um, Most of the new Alexander 103s I have tried are objectively good instruments, especially if you're using it with the right mouthpiece. You got to remember, if you're using an Alexander 103, you really want a Euro Shank mouthpiece. And frankly, they play better with mouthpieces from like Bruno Tilt's or Alexander brand mouthpiece or a Engelbert Schmidt mouthpiece. Um, Kanye D 1954. So you got yourself a number series. Great. I like the old Kanye Ds a lot better than the newer ones. That's just me. Um, and the number series, Kanye, these ones made in the 1950s are really really good. So if you want to go the Kanye D route, I always recommend, if you have the money, that you start trying to find something that was made in the 1950s or 60s. However, the problem is a lot of those instruments are starting to reach the end of their serviceable life. So the metal's wearing down, they're starting to get patches, they're starting to get too many patches. They're on their third or fourth valve rebuild and just getting to the point where it can't be, where the instrument just can't be held together anymore. Um, that being said, you can find newer Kinect Ds in the mix that are good as well. Here we go. Definitely liking the Hoyer. Um, Between Paxman of the 1990s and Con 8D of 1960s, which would be better? I think that's comparing apples and oranges. Um, Paxmans have a unique sound. Con 8Ds have a unique sound. It's kind of like, do you want to play a Paxman or a Con? They're both going to be high quality, well made instruments. Um, are you employed in an orchestra? If so, are you satisfied with the salary? Yes, I am employed in multiple orchestras on a part-time basis. I do not have a full-time orchestra job because my full-time job is owning the shop and running the shop. Um, no comments on the salary. Um, what are your reviews about the Yamaha 871? Any advice for the Yamaha Shank? Greetings from Panama. Greetings from Texas. Um, the 871, I think, is one of the best horns Yamaha's ever made. Um, I really like the blow of it. The sound is good, the feel is good. It's just overall, it's a really great horn. Yamaha Yamaha uses something called a combo shank, which is um the only other manufacturer I know of that uses a combo shank is Engelbert Schmidt. What the combo shank means is that you're supposed to be able to use European shank mouthpieces and American shank mouthpieces in the same receiver. I have found that newer Yamahas tend to work better with a Morse taper mouthpiece over the European taper mouthpiece. The compromise of the combo taper is that sometimes you get just the tiniest bit of wobble with both types of mouthpieces sometimes, but it's not really a problem or something to be worried about. Older Yamahas, a lot of times on older Yamahas, the receiver was a lot more inconsistent. So some were just straight up larger than the others. And of course, on the ones that are larger, you're going to want to go with a European taper mouthpiece. But for newer Yamahas, especially like the 871, I think you'll do fine with a Morse taper mouthpiece. Um, why are Yamaha horns so high quality? I don't think they're sharing all those secrets with everyone, but I just imagine it's the same reason why any company who makes good products has good products. good company culture, employees treated well, and given the time and energy to innovate and make the horns as best as possible. What effect would a bronze bell flare have on a nickel horn have? I have a Halton with a bronze flare, but can't tell a difference really. So honestly, between bronze is gonna be bronze is gonna be a little softer than nickel silver, but it's not gonna be it's gonna be more of just a tonal shift. It's hard to describe in simple words. Um, is it a Lawson flare, by the way? They're the only company I know of that has really gone into like the different bronze flares, like bronze and things like that. Um, which French horn would you recommend for beginners who want to devote their time to the instrument? Again, that depends on how much money you have to spend. Our various 5 and 5G horns are great double horns and great for many middle schoolers and high school students who want a high quality horn for about $3,000. I mean, it's our brand, so take what I'm going to say with a grain of salt, but I truly believe it is the best horn that you can get in that $3,000 price range by far. Um, if you don't have that much to spend, if you're looking at like 2000 mid 2000s, find a used Con 8D. It's going to be an Eastlake Con 8D. Um, but there are good used Eastlake Con 8Ds that you can find for about 24, 25, 26. Um, they're great horns and a great value. And if you don't have $2,000 to spend, when you get into the 15, 1600s, you want to look for like a used King Eroica or a used King Fidelio. I don't see them come up as much as I used to, but if you do, they're great horns and by far the best horns that you can get at that price point. Though, in general, if you can't find one of those, there isn't a whole lot in the under $2,000 price point that I can truly recommend for a double horn. If you're looking at a single horn, then you have more options. You have the Yamaha F and B flat singles. They're great and very ubiquitous. You have our Varus Scholar 3/4 horn, that's under $1,000. A great horn for a beginner, especially a smaller beginner who just doesn't have the money to spend. And you should never feel that you need to stretch your budget or go into debt or anything like that buy, to buy a certain instruments. There are good instruments at every price point. So if you can afford more, I would go with more. But ultimately, your audience only cares about one thing. How do you sound? How well do you play? And that's going to be mostly determined by how much and how smartly you practice. Okay, so we have Engelbert Schmidt is making demo video. Okay, do you know anything about the Landstro AO2? I've only tried it once at a workshop, and it was a great horn. It was it was it was really really good. He's using a ramp that's not very conventional, but it obviously works. So from my one time trying that Landstro model, I only have positive things to say about it. Okay. Yellow brass. Okay, that makes more sense. A yellow brass flare. Yellow brass is a softer metal than nickel silver. Um, the characteristics of yellow brass is that it tends to be more mellow in the softer dynamics, more harsh and brassy in the higher dynamics. So yellow brass gives you a wide range of stylistic and tonal choices that nickel silver and gold brass don't have, which is why yellow brass is the more popular metal for French horns. Question: I particularly enjoy playing in 8D. I find it easy to produce a big soaring sound, but I find playing notes above A on the staff are particularly treacherous. So con on some con 8Ds do have intonation problems on the B flat side of the horn. Where the B flat side of the horn is actually a little too sharp, and um, that can make it uh, harder to really center those higher notes. Without hearing you play, though, I would make sure you go to a good friend or a teacher and have them try those notes on the horn as well, and have them confirm that it is the horn, and then you can move on with solutions from there. One semester One semester away from graduation notes, there's a high demand for school band directors. Is there a solid mid-range French horn that you would recommend? Honestly, Varus is a great horn, great horn for that. $3,500, you have a horn that can do almost anything, and sounds good. Um, if you want to spend more, of course, the Yamahas are great at the $5,000 price point. You get to $6,000, I'd recommend a Hans Hoyer G10 or a Finca Westphalia. Any tips on learning how to get trills on the F horn? I guess the only tips I can give you is that it's all about the air. It's not about the muscle. If you focus on just twitching your muscles fast enough, you're not going to be able to do it. It's about relaxing, using fast air, and just, for example, if you hear me play a trill, I can do so without getting. As I was saying, I can do so without getting tense. It's just relaxing, moving that air, and starting slow. You start slow and you speed up, speed up, speed up until you can get there. I guess the only other thing I would say is don't practice trills this way, or at least it never worked out for me. If you start up slow and just accelerando into the trill, for myself, I found that it just means I want to start every single trill too slow. And that happens until I started practicing the trills at a steady speed. If I'm going to play slow, I'm going to do it slow. If I'm going to do it fast, I'm going to do it fast. I'm not going to start slow and speed up. Okay. Mm. What horn can produce said big sound without being harder in the upper range than some student horns I can play? Okay, so I mean, a big horn does not mean, or at least should not mean, any sort of handicap in the upper range. Some horns may have physical problems, or you know technical issues that may cause it to not play well in the high range. But for example, like this Hans Hoyer 6801, this is a gigantic horn, and I can play high pretty easily on it. Playing high on it is not very hard and doesn't take any more work than the Geyer style horns. The largeness of the horn really just means that the sound is going to be bigger. So if a horn has a problem in the high range, it's probably because that horn has a problem in the high range. Um, Hoyers don't have that problem. Elkhart 8Ds don't have that problem. Some East, I'd say most Eastlakes don't have that problem, but some do. Okay. Practicing 10 minutes every day. Yeah, I would believe that. I mean, no one spends an hour playing trill. Well, you shouldn't spend an hour playing trills a day. It usually it's about just a little bit of time every single day, and it slowly gets better. Let me here. I have the YouTube chat in front of me, but I haven't seen much of the Facebook chat. And not much in the Facebook chat. Yes, but thank you for all of the comments. How does your setup work? Microphone transitioning from your commentary to playing. So yeah, quickly I could spend all day on this subject because I'm a bit of a tech nerd. So I've probably put too much thought. I've put more thought into this than I should have. But I have a black magic design. You can actually see it in the picture here. It's a streaming deck, so it allows me to switch between the cameras that are hooked up via HDMI. So I just have a DSLR in front of me, and that's the main camera. On the second camera here, I just have an HDMI cable from my computer into the streaming deck. So it's just streaming that monitor. And on the third camera here, I just have my iPhone hooked up with the HDMI to Lightning adapter. Um, and as far as the mics, I have a clip-on mic here. It's a Sennheiser XSW. So I just plug it into my audio interface, and I set that as one of the mics. And then I have a ribbon mic. Ribbon mics work really well on brass instruments. If you haven't tried it, I would highly recommend you look into it. I just have a ribbon mic as my second mic, and on this streaming deck, I have the audio interface plugged into both of the mic ports here, so I'm able to switch between mics on here as well. Okay. All right. Again, thank you all for the comments. I hope to do more of this. I have a lot of fun. I hope you guys enjoy these streams as well and the horn comparisons. Tune in on Friday at 3 o'clock, and hopefully it won't be 15 minutes late this time. Hopefully YouTube will cooperate. And we'll be talking triple horns. Bye.